Something is very, very wrong in the mysterious Russian region of Magnitoshakhtinsk. So wrong, in fact, that the government started broadcasting informative videos in order to try and protect the population from whatever is roaming the area. As it might turn out though, you shouldn't be too quick to follow their advice, because it could actually cost you your life. Hello, people. I wanted to quickly thank everyone who watched and engaged with my last video. I put a lot of work in it, and I'm really happy that it seemed to touch some of you. It was a bit of an emotional one for me, not gonna lie. So, let's move on to today's video. Some time ago, I covered a Russian analog horror series called Siberian Chronicles, or Centrosiberian Chronicles if we want to be pedantic, and people really seemed to like it. After watching more Russian analog horror, I can confidently say that, in my opinion, it is by far the best series that the country has to offer so far. It's inventive, varied, creepy, and builds a very interesting plot with recurring characters and an ever-evolving lore. But in the comments, many of you suggested that I check out other series, and the number one most mentioned is definitely Magnitoshakhtinskaya Область. It's not surprising that it's been so requested, seeing as it's the most famous Russian analog horror series with a total view count of over 7 million. While it's not as complex or as well made as Siberian Chronicles, it still does some pretty cool things, in my opinion. I don't want to give away too much, but as you can see, its style is very minimalistic, opting mostly for the use of black stick figures on a blue background. While it is very simple, it's also very recognizable, and it has spawned a lot of imitators which show you that getting the style right is not as easy as it seems. So now, let's just get into it. So, Magnitoshakhtinsk is a region that doesn't exist, much like Centrosibirsk or Mandela County. And as you'll see, these guys were very obviously inspired by our boy Alex Kister. The name is probably a mix of Shakhtinsk and Magnitogorsk, two actually real places. And obviously they have to pick the most difficult name to pronounce ever, just like Centrosibirsk. And Oblast basically just means region or province. First of all, let's look at the title of the first upload, because it gives us important information. The first part reads, Opletai attack people in the woods. So we should find a way to translate Opletai in English. It comes from Opletat, which basically means to entwine something or to wrap something around something else. Seeing as wrappers would sound goofy and entwiners too poetic, let's go with tanglers. So, tanglers attack people in the woods. Alright. The second part reads, Main Russian MCS department for the region of Magnitoshakhtinsk, where the MCS is the Ministry of Emergency Situations. The description gives us a quote. The Magnitoshakhtinsk MCS is worried about the increase of tangler attacks on people in the rural area. For this reason, an alert broadcast will be released on the official channel of the main Russian MCS department for the region of Magnitoshakhtinsk, announced the director for the MCS of the Magnitoshakhtinskaya Область. So let's watch. We immediately get the Magnitoshakhtinsk MCS logo and spooky music. Then a text-to-speech voice tells us that with the beginning of spring we have to be more careful, because of forest fires and because the tanglers come out of their layers. To avoid any encounters with these predators, we should stay away from the woodland. What do we do if we actually get attacked? First of all, we should try and keep on our feet, as the tanglers often try to squeeze the victim's legs in order to make them fall on the ground. Second, we should try to grab the tangler by the neck. It is quite easy to do if you don't panic. Thanks, I'm sure it is. It's like when people tell you that you should punch a shark on the nose. Of course, I'll do that right after I lose my lunch through both ends of my body. When you have managed to grab the neck, you should try to squeeze it as hard as you can. If you're lucky, and I love the wording, if you're lucky, the tangler will release you. When you're free, you should run away, trying to run as close to the trees as possible, as the tangler is quite slow and not very agile. Most likely, he'll get stuck among the trees. Be careful and inform the MCS if you run into a tangler. One cool thing to mention is that the tangler is actually apparently a real figure from South Siberian folklore. It's a creature that wraps around its prey and then sucks their blood. From what the folklore wiki says, it was believed that the Tangler was just half of a person, having only one leg and one arm, and that in this state it cannot do much. But when two of them tied together, then you couldn't escape them even on a horse. Pretty cool. So let's go and watch the second episode. This one is called Anti-Akratическое формирование, which roughly means Anti-Akratid unit. We'll soon understand what Akratid means. The description contains the first two lines of the video, which tell us that serving in the MCS is one of the most honorable and dangerous jobs one can have. This video was made for the new recruits and candidates for the Anti-Akratid unit. The handling of emergency situations is one of the most dangerous and risky tasks. Then the voice tells us to pay attention, and this plays. Whoa, that was dope. Apparently, this was a possession test. If we have a reaction to it, we should immediately go and ask for help at the department for the fight against kefalny dangers. I'll tell you what that means in a moment. As you can see, a reaction consists of confusion, delirium, spasms, and loss of consciousness. You'll learn more during the courses of resistance against Akratids. Because of the rise in Akratid activity, Magnitoshakhtinsk government signed a new ordinance, for which any contact between people and Akratids is to be considered an emergency situation. The document was signed on October 23rd of 1992. This, at least, gives us an idea of when the series is set. The Anti-Akratid unit was created right after this ordinance, and their duties consist of the protection of the population from emergency situations, to ensure the general security of people against Akratids, the security of people on bodies of water, if I got that right. I don't know why it's specifically mentioned. And then also general patrolling. Also, the implementation of measures aimed to prevent, forecast, and mitigate the consequences of an emergency situation, and a bunch of other specific stuff. When doing your duty, you will come face to face with the Akratids, which can be divided into two types: pragmats, who have a physical form and present a physical threat, and kefals, who don't have a physical form and present a mental threat. I wonder what this reminds me of. Also, there we go with the kefali thing. Both names obviously come from Greek words, one from pragma, which roughly means action, and one from kefalos, which means head. Well, it's either that or a fish, you decide. Also, the video ends with this message. May Perun help you. I don't actually get what name the voices use. If any of you understand it or know it, then tell me, please. Again, we start with the logo. In the last year, in the area of Magnitoshakhtinsk, 537 emergency situations tied to Akratids were recorded. 53 of these were tied to an infection of Nespekh, which I think is a play on the word uspech, which means success. The infection mostly hits women and elderly people. The parasite is invisible to the naked eye, but its effects are noticeable and can be lethal. First signs of the infection: slight fatigue, irritability, loss of appetite. Second stage of the infection: the subject keeps losing his drive to perform his daily chores and duties. Third stage of the infection: the subject stops performing his chores entirely. He gets a constant headache and nausea, and completely loses his appetite. Fourth stage: at this point, a cure is basically completely impossible. The subject stops showing any sign of brain activity, and his breathing stops. If you do get any symptoms, you should immediately go to a hospital.
No shit!
When the infected is put in a special MCS hospital, the active phase of the treatment will begin. The only treatment known to work so far is making the subject perform normal daily chores. Oh, alright. Chores like, dry yourself with the towel, look in the mirror, put on an HEV suit, be bloated in front of a basket, and roll a ball, put on your shoes and care for some houseplants, I guess. This and that, and hail the coat hanger. That's all we need to know about this Akratid. So, that was actually cute, I think. It's a pretty cool concept, except that it's basically depression until your brain shuts down. And I do like the fact that the cure is basically doing house chores. In the description we also finally get something more. Supplementary material for those serving in the Anti-Akratid unit. This material is classified as secret. Please make sure that the access is authorized. Interview with Sofia Timofeyevna Nikitina from December 12, 1995. Sofia Timofeyevna was admitted to the hospital with a case of common Nespekh, type B. The interview takes place 1 month after she was discharged. The interview is conducted by her attending physician, Mikhail Nikolaevich Mortsev. Transcript of the recording. Good afternoon, Sofia. Hello. How are you feeling? Wonderful. I have a very good appetite. That's good. Do you know why I asked you to come for a visit today? I guess that's how it works. I'm not a doctor. The thing is that you haven't showed up for 3 consecutive weekly checkups. That's worrying. It's just that I've had stuff to do. There's a lot of things to do around the house. I understand. I'm sorry. There's a coffee stain on your side of the table. Could you wipe it off? He takes out a wet wipe and holds it out for Sofia. After a short pause, Mikhail Mortsev repeats the request. The woman looks at the napkin with an empty stare, then starts breathing heavily. Sofia, are you feeling unwell? Please, don't send me back to the hospital. I'm cured. Sofia is scared and very upset. The woman suddenly stands up. Calm down. Sit back down, please. No. I don't want to go back. The woman falls in the corner of the room, holding her head. The interview is over. Sofia Timofeyevna is set to repeat her treatment at the Elkitsa. Alright, that's pretty cool. I really liked reading the description in Centrosibirsk, so this is right up my alley, even though it's nothing special. Let's keep going. This one is called Укромщики, which would roughly translate to something like hiders. The description tells us that the video is from 1998. Letting your kid go outside, you should always keep in mind the safety rules against the hiders. In the last 2 years, thanks to these simple rules and to the citizens being more informed, we managed to lower the rate of attacks by half. First of all, the child should avoid entering abandoned buildings or going near them, because the hiders often live in such places and await any distracted victim. They usually inhabit the basements of abandoned buildings. On this building we can see the writing «Велес спасет наши души», which means Veles will save our souls. I'm not sure what Veles stands for. So what should you do if you meet one of these guys? If it attacks you, then there's basically no chances of survival. First of all, try to grab hold of something. The Akratid tries to grab its victims by the legs and drag them to its lair. If you manage to stay in place, call out for help or try to get attention in any way. When other people show up, the hider will most likely, again, I can't with the wording, it will most likely let you go. The best way to protect yourself is to completely avoid abandoned buildings and yada yada yada. And then we get this. That's revolting. Listen, I hate it when children are used as a cheap way to disturb the viewers in media, but when it's done right, it works very well, you know, like in The Blob, or in When Evil Lurks, or Skinamarink. In this case, it gets a pass for me. It's very unexpected and it's very messed up. Also, this probably doesn't hit as hard for people who didn't grow up in these kinds of places. But trust me, the amount of abandoned buildings in Eastern European countries is crazy. I used to play in them with a friend, and they're always incredibly eerie, mainly because of junkies and crazy homeless people. In fact, the last time I went back to my country, I took a picture. Look, the face itself is quite goofy, but in that atmosphere it becomes very spooky, trust me. So, imagining myself as a child playing there with the risk of a damn hider being ready to snatch me up, yeah, no chief. That's the kind of stuff that my grandma would have told me to make me stay away from such places. Now that I'm thinking about it, it would be a perfect spot to film some kind of horror short. Anyway, next one. First of all, I like that thumbnail. This one is called Жердяй, which is kind of hard to translate without making it ridiculous, because it would be something like beanpole. It indicates a tall and lanky person, a slim boy, a thin guy, a slender man. Yeah, I think I'm going to call it Gaunt. Suggest other ideas if you want. Citizens in the village of Magnitoshakhtinsk often complain that they hear a strange noise coming from the roof of their house at night. From January 1993, the Gaunt have been spotted in practically all villages. There's nothing to worry about. Consider this your own Gaunt woodland neighbor. Yeah, sure, I will do that. Of course. During the cold winters, the Gaunt like to come to the villages and warm their long limbs over the chimneys. It's funny that the word they use is lapu, which is more like paws. They're trying to be cute about it. What do you do if you get an uncalled guest? First of all, don't worry. The Gaunt is relatively harmless. Relatively harmless. Still, that doesn't mean that you should go outside. If it gets scared, it could hit you powerfully on the head. Second, call up the MCS and give your address. They will immediately send someone over. Then we get the ending message again. Be careful and always tell the MCS if you meet an unclean? Well, this is different, now they're calling them unclean. We get a second video though, which tells us that since December of 1994, the rules about the Gaunt have changed. They've been categorized as kefal types instead of pragmats. So pay attention to the current version. Again, people complain that they hear strange sounds coming from their roofs. You shouldn't underestimate these sounds, it could be a Gaunt. So what should you do? First of all, try to concentrate. You might feel a headache or nausea. Keep calm and concentrated. Second, check if the windows are closed. If they're open, try to close them without looking out into the darkness. Third, close the blinds. And again, don't look into the darkness. Fourth, call up the MCS. Fifth, don't go outside for any reason, even if the MCS workers ask you to. Sixth, don't believe the voices from the darkness. So, okay, that was pretty damn cool. I think that these last two episodes are definitely more well thought out and effective. Let's see where this leads us. This one is called Woodlanders and the Outer Woods. Towards the end of summer, the citizens of Magnitoshakhtinsk go looking for mushrooms in the woods. The smaller woods close to the populated area are relatively harmless if you follow the safety rules and don't wander too deep, but sometimes the foragers go searching the outer woods. Outside of wild animals and different types of unclean, these woods are also inhabited by Woodlanders. So what should you do if you find yourself in outer woods? If you didn't go too deep, then you better leave the woods immediately. Try not to make loud noises. The owner of the woods, as they call it, doesn't like it when uninvited guests come and make noise. Also, don't get distracted by the voices coming from the depths of the woods. You could hear the voices of your friends and family members. If you walked in too deep and can't leave, then you need to do the following. First, put your clothes on backwards. Second, find an old dry oak with no leaves and circle it counterclockwise until you see an opening in the woods. Third, walk out of the woods calmly. Don't turn for any reason. You might hear something getting closer to you from behind or somebody asking you to turn around. Be careful and never walk into the outer woods. We then get again a message telling us that at the moment of this video's creation, the MCS didn't have enough information about the Woodlanders. An MCS patrol has been created to stop anyone from entering the outer woods and to stop anything from getting out. And then, in the last second, we get this. I don't know what the voice is saying, but we get this strange symbol. You can also notice that the hand of the creature that we see in the video also has a symbol, which looks like an eye. Interesting. So this one is called Ночь Карачуна, so Night of the Karachun, which is another Slavic folklore figure, a malevolent spirit of cold and winter, sometimes thought to be an underworld deity. Apparently though, it's not only malevolent, as it protects and helps people born in December. So the video starts by telling us about the winter solstice that happens between the 21st and the 22nd of December, and that it's a dangerous time. It is the night of the Karachun, and during this short period, the amount of emergency situations caused by natural phenomena is higher. Stuff like snowstorms and avalanches have a 47% increase in likelihood. The unclean are also more active at this time, awakened by hunger and by the freezing cold. The Karachun apparently leads them towards people. So the government decided to turn the days from the 20th of December to the 23rd into holidays. That way no one has to get out. Then we're shown the steps to prepare oneself for the winter. First, insulate all doors and windows. Second, stock up on wood if you live in a house, or make sure you have your own working electric heating if you live in an apartment. because the central heating systems might give out. Third, stock up on food and water. Fourth, close up the curtains or blinds on your window or whatever you have to block them off, and check out if the locks on your doors hold well. Fifth, if any of your farm animals died right before this period, take their carcasses away from your home, at a distance of at least 50 meters, and preferably in the woods. While waiting out this period, you need to remember very simple rules, like not leaving your home for any reason. If you followed the previous rules, there shouldn't be any reason for you to get out. In the days prior to the night of the Karachun, you might run into idols. Attention, under no circumstances should you get close to the idols or try to help anyone in danger by yourself. You should wear warm clothes, because any type of cold during this night could turn into tonsillitis, otitis, and bronchitis, and other complications. In the community tab, we can also find a short story, Night Call. So here it is. If you want, you can skip forward.
My name's Ivan. I work at the Magnitoshakhtinsk MGS from 1990. In January of 93, they reassigned me to the Anti-Akratid unit. At first, it was hard to get used to, but the job is relatively easier. At the end of the day, putting out a fire is harder than chasing away a Gaunt off private property. Still, doing it practically every day is not very pleasant, especially having to drive out on a call at 2 a.m. Memory works in such a way that bad things are forgotten and the good stuff is covered in the vines of those good old days. But unfortunately, it doesn't always work this way. There is one event that I'll remember forever. At 3 a.m., I get a call on the landline. Hello, Ivan, can you hear me? Yes, speak, I answered in a sleepy but focused tone. We have a problem. A Gaunt is warming his hands over the chimney of a house in your area. Get ready, we'll send the address to your pager. And what can you do? I had to be quick and get dressed, seeing as the scary Gaunt is warming his hands. The uniform was obviously not meant to be worn over Grandma's thick sweater. I could hardly move my arms in front of me, but what can you do? Outside it's winter and the uniform is thin as a pig's intestine. After I got dressed, I got in my car with no hurry, turned the key in the ignition, and started driving towards the place. The drive was very short. The house was in my village, 3 streets away from my own. When I got there, I was surprised to find that the front door was wide open. What, you couldn't wait 10 minutes? The Gaunt might be harmless, but it can bash you across your empty head so hard that even your mother will feel it. At that point, I thought that the owner decided to chase away the beanpole by himself. I had a look around the property, nothing there. Only the door was open and swaying with the wind. I walked up to the entrance. Silence. A weak yellow light was warming the dry cold air, illuminating the porch of the wooden house. In no hurry, I circled around the house, checking out the roof first of all. Usually the Gaunt rip off the weather vane out of boredom, or they bend the chimney's rain cover. This time it was different. The weather vane was still there, but the rain cover was ripped off. About 2 square meters of snow fell from the roof, looking like a little path up to the chimney. Silence. The silence made me weary most of all. I decided to go inside. Getting up to the entrance, in the snow I saw 10 thin lines leading to the door. Crossing the threshold, I heard disgustingly loud munching and dull cracking sounds from the corner. Taking one decisive step, I entered the room. On the floor lay a grayish, somewhat elongated heap. I froze. In the center of this heap was a man. It's hard to call that sight a man. The left arm was bent backwards behind his back and touching the right side of his pelvis. The heel of the right leg could touch the nose. The whole body was covered in thick and dark blood. The rest of the details was hard to make out because of the thing which had tangled around the man and was actively picking among the man's bones. The cracking and munching stopped. The heap stopped moving for a moment. Then I saw a face. It came out of the heap like a periscope. The empty black eyes on smooth skin stretched across his skull looked at me for a second. Then a piece of flesh fell from its bloody mouth, and it screamed at me like a cat hissing at a person that got too close to the mouse it caught or to a piece of sausage. I started to run. I came there to chase away a Gaunt and wasn't ready at all to find a tangler. Now outside, I got into the car and called for backup on the radio. I Afterwards, it turned out that there was no Gaunt at all. The Tangler came out of hibernation too soon and decided to quench its hunger, a common wanderer. It was mistaken for a Gaunt because it decided to get in using the chimney. The owner probably saw the long legs hanging from the roof and thought it was a Gaunt warming his hands on the chimney. Then Tangler got in through the same chimney. The owner tried to run out but was grabbed and killed. Our boys came soon enough and eliminated the thing. The man was buried in a closed casket. What's the moral of the story? I don't know, I just wanted to share.
So, come on, that was cool. I think that adding little short stories like this to your series really pays off, if you write them well enough, of course. This very much sounds like a classic post you'd find on X or something. Nothing amazing, but it adds to the lore and makes this place feel actually lived in. I started out not really giving a shit about this series, that's why I didn't cover it before. Every time I started the first 2 episodes, I was like,
Yeah, this sucks.
and dropped it. But these last ones are actually pretty damn cool, because they start building all this lore even though they're so short, and you just want to see more. But there's a problem. This episode was uploaded 2 years ago, and it's basically the last one, because the project was interrupted from what I gather. But there is a video uploaded a month ago on the channel. Apparently it's an episode that was deleted before, which they decided to retcon and re-upload. So after 2 years they decide to upload again. They say that it's not a sign of the continuation of the story, but I don't know, it's kinda strange, isn't it? So let's see what it's about. The title says Magnitoshakhtinsk October 5th, 1992, and the description reads, in memory of the tragedy that took the lives of 142 people. The first frame says that the programming is interrupted until the start of approved material. Year 1954. Geologists from Moscow, led by Mikhail Polyakov, discover a colossal deposit of ferruginous quartzite in the area of Perkov village. In a year, the worker city of Magnitoshakhtinsk is founded, and the work starts. But they make another big discovery, a great amount of antique artifacts and also this strange mummified body. Then we get the same symbol that we saw in the last video and see this. And we hear the same sound that plays during the possession test. And so the series is over. So this last part makes me kinda mad, because it really does seem like they copied the idea of cursed archaeological findings from Centrosibirsk, even though it's used in a different way, obviously. I wish they would have gone with something more original. It's still pretty cool, I guess. So overall, what are your impressions of this series? I think it could be a very cool one if they kept slowly developing the lore more and more. And obviously there is something weird going on with these government-issued videos, with weird symbols appearing and stuff like that. It's almost as if someone was messing with the information to harm the population, which, again, obviously is very much in the style of Mandela. I especially love how many of these things are inspired by actual Slavic folklore, instead of being completely made up. And again, it's not the first series to use mythology by tying it to its lore, but I always found it very cool. I also thought that it was too shallow and minimalistic at first, and I still do think that the first 2 episodes are kinda weak and it gets better as time moves on. But then I found out about all the copycats, so many copycats. And they're all complete garbage. Outside the fact that they couldn't even be to make more than like 3 frames most of the time, the writing is just abysmal and makes Magnitoshakhtinsk sound like it was written by Melville. I kid you not, it's almost always like,
in this place there's this creature that looks like a dog, but it's not a dog, it's a monster. It kills people very painfully, you can't escape, the monster will get you.
It was obviously written by actual 12-year-olds. Needless to say that I won't cover them. So I hope you liked this little overview of Magnitoshakhtinskaya Oblast, and tell me what you think about it while we wait for the new Centrosibirsk episode. Thank you for watching, stay spooky, and see you, space monsters.